Joining us now, Ambassador Ann Patterson, former ambassador for Egypt, and she is now the president of the U.S. Qatar Council. And if there's anyone that knows what's going on in the Middle East, we have her on the phone right now. And throughout the country, her record of service to the United States and the Foreign Service, very long and very distinguished record. She's now becoming a regular on our show, so I'm blessed to have her with me. Ambassador, good Friday morning. Welcome.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
I know, because you're so much fun and you add such insight, and I get very excited when you're on because you always teach me things I don't know. So that's a good thing for me and my listeners. Ambassador, okay, so Jared Kushner. So now he says, we understand this Middle East plan, like the mother of all plans, right, that has not leaked out. In fact, this is like the only thing in the Trump White House that hasn't leaked out. Everything else they've ever done is leaked out by everybody. This has not been leaked. Now he says he's going to reveal his long-awaited deal next month, despite rejection from the Palestinians that don't want anything to do with him because they don't trust him. But we understand that it's not going to mention a two-state solution. What is up with this?
Well, no one's actually seen the plan, and as you know, John, it's been much discussed, but much delayed. And the rumor, gossip, which is really just gossip, is that basically it's abandoning the two-state solution, and his main thrust will be in trying to get Gulf countries to contribute a lot of financial support to the Palestinians. In other words, I think the theory is forget the separate state. We're going to improve your standard of living. I don't know how much money he's gotten from our friends in the Gulf to support this plan. Probably less than he expects, but probably not zero either. But I think that's the thrust, and my prediction is that the Palestinians won't accept it.
That's what I think too. I mean, I went to the Qatar Forum in Doha, where there was a major interview. I know Ambassador Patterson, you were there. There was a major interview with the chief negotiator for the Palestinians, and he basically said, "Look, we're not going to accept something that is jammed down our throat that do not give us sovereignty. We're not even going to be at the table." So I don't think this is something you can buy your way out of.
No, and they haven't met with anyone from the Trump administration, oh, my God, since the embassy was moved, and I think before that. So I think they're going to resist this. And, in fact, this same procedure of upping financial contributions to the Palestinians has been tried at least twice before as an incentive to a peace process, and it's frankly failed both times because, as you say, most people aren't for sale. It's not about the money. It's about their, frankly, their dignity and prestige and their sovereignty that they want to pursue.
Ambassador Patterson, Kushner's been working on this for 2 years, and there's been a lot of hullabaloo about that he had some master plan. I mean, he started by meeting with MBS and MBZ, and they were going to be key from Saudi and UAE in brokering a deal. But it is inconceivable to me that you would even go forward with something that denies the Palestinian people a sense of sovereignty over their own land, whether it's mixed or not. Even the layman has to look at this and say, what exactly have you been working on for 2 years?
Well, one thing they've been working on, John, is to try and box the Palestinians in. This was about moving the embassy, closing the Palestinian office here, reducing funding, eliminating funding for the UN agency that supports the Palestinians. Some of that was made up by European allies, but they've been trying to box the Palestinians in to show them they have no option but to accept this plan. I don't think that'll work in the Middle East. Probably wouldn't work anywhere else either, but I can assure you it won't work in a place like the Middle East.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with Ambassador Ann Patterson. She's former ambassador to Egypt, also served as ambassador to Pakistan and assistant secretary of state for Near Eastern Affairs, that tenure ending in 2017. She is a career foreign service diplomat for the United States, and Ambassador Patterson now serving as the president of the U.S. Qatar Council. A very important situation. Ambassador, I don't think this plan is going to work, so we're on the same page with that. I'm kind of floored by it, to be honest, because I thought that it would seem that the concessions that the Trump administration had made to the state of Israel in moving the embassy to Jerusalem and in recognizing the Golan Heights, logic said to me, okay, the president is doing this to give Israel the two key things they want. If in exchange for that, we're going to get a two-state plan, right? Wouldn't that be the logical conclusion that one would have?
Yes, the logical conclusion was he's given Israel a lot up front, and they're going to have to reciprocate when the plan comes out as part of the plan, that they would have to support a two-state solution. And, of course, many elements of that have been under negotiation for years. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Again, in fairness to the administration, no one has actually seen the plan yet.
That's true.
But it doesn't seem as if there's any, frankly, heavy requirement on the Israelis to play ball with this plan.
Ambassador, if you were advising Jared Kushner right now, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to go back to some kind of two-state formulation. I think it's frankly a good idea. It is a good idea to increase funding for the Palestinians and give them more economic opportunities. Of course, that's but he should go back to the two-state solution because there's nothing else that's viable. Where this is going is a so-called one-state solution, and that's going to have huge impact on Israel. Because what happens when the Palestinians demand the right to vote in Israel, for instance? And that's going to put huge pressure on the government. So there are going to be a lot of issues that will come about if there's not a two-state solution, demographic issues. And I would advise Mr. Kushner to go back to the two-state solution and try and negotiate that. And they have a lot of clout with Israel. They might be able to actually, after many decades of working on this, the real irony, I think, is the Trump administration might be in a position to really make a deal. That's the tragedy of all this, I think.
It's a tragedy without a two-state solution because I really thought they were working towards this. Of course, this has leaked out. So, you've said it 3 times, and I want to reiterate it. You're right. We don't know what the plan is, and there could be misinformation. This could have been leaked out erroneously by any number of sources looking to blow it up ahead of time, including the Israeli lobby. So let's just wait. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's why we have you on. Ambassador Patterson says, hold your horses, even though you're at the racetrack, hold your horses, just wait, see what the plan is, and we'll go from there. Okay, another big development this late last week, the Trump administration wanting to classify the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And, of course, the problem with that is the Muslim Brotherhood, whether you like them or not, they're also a political party with elected officials, duly elected by people in various countries. Was this a good idea, Ambassador Patterson, or a bad idea?
Well, this is a very bad idea that's resurfaced over the years, and you hit the nail on the head, John. The problem with this is they're essentially Muslim Brotherhood parties in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Jordan, in Yemen, and they're mainstream parties. Of course, they've been sharply repressed in Egypt, but particularly in Tunisia, they're an absolutely in Morocco, they're an absolutely mainstream party and have played a major role. So I think it's a mistake from the standpoint of our Middle East policy, but I also think it's a mistake from the standpoint of our counterterrorism policy. These designations, which are very complicated to enforce, should be saved for real terrorist groups so we can bring the full pressure of the U.S. government to bear on them and not basically for political reasons, which I think is what is motivating this.
Totally. Again, you might not like them. You might not agree with their agenda. You might feel that they've infiltrated certain things. but it's kind of like Hamas. I mean, when you have elected officials, elected by the people, serving in various parliaments, like you mentioned, it's tough to just with one swath say you're all part of a nefarious terrorist organization. Certainly some are, that's been proven to be, but I'm with you on that. I think it's a bad idea. We're with Ann Patterson, Ambassador Ann Patterson, former ambassador for the United States to Egypt, to Pakistan. And let's get to Libya right now. The UAE and Egypt, your former country where you were ambassador in Cairo, Ambassador Patterson, they're backing this kind of renegade commander. I don't even I want to say his
General
name right.
Haftar. General
Yeah,
Haftar.
Kafila Haftar,
Yeah.
who they see as the main obstacle, if you will, or the main bulwark against various armed groups in North Africa. I'm suspect because everything the UAE and MBZ get involved in, I'm immediately suspect of it. And by the way, just for the sake of argument, the trade number with the United Arab Emirates and Iran is $4 billion annually, billion with a B. And by the way, the trade between Iran and Qatar is like $100 million. I just want to put that out there. So anything the UAE and MBZ gets involved in, I'm suspect. What say you?
So General Haftar lived in Falls Church, exactly where I live, for about 20 years.
Really?
He was brought here by the Central Intelligence Agency. He's an American citizen, actually. He went back to Libya, and I think this is a disastrous policy, backing General Haftar. I know the president spoke to him last week sometime. He's basically setting himself up as a warlord and attacking Tripoli and attacking the internationally recognized government, the government of Sarraj. He's attacking Tripoli, and I first of all think he's not a very competent warlord, which is the worst, possibly the worst of all worlds. He's going to increase migration from Libya, which is already a terrible problem for our European allies. And then the civilian cost and the humanitarian cost is enormous. He needs, and I'm sure he expects, to be brought into the government in some capacity. The UN's working on this. But we need to support the legitimate government of Libya, and we need to do everything we can to reduce the violence and support humanitarian assistance there.
So, what should the administration's position be here, Ambassador?
The same it's been all along, through the Obama administration, through the Trump administration, to support the government of national accord, to support the legitimately recognized government in Tripoli. There have been negotiations for years to try and bring General Haftar in, and through both administrations, to try and bring General Haftar into the government in some responsible way. He's largely rejected that. But it's not to have him attack Tripoli. We should continue our policy, support the UN process, support a political solution. Senator Lindsey Graham issued a very good statement on this a couple of days ago. He had talked to Sarraj, and he said the only solution here is a political solution. It's not a battle on the streets of Tripoli.
I think you're right about that. So. And again, like you said, he's got a history of not exactly being one of the most competent people in things that he's involved in. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We got a couple more minutes. We're with former ambassador to Egypt and Pakistan for the United States, Ambassador Ann Patterson, and she also served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs up until 2017. Ambassador Patterson here on the John Fredericks Show is now president of the U.S. Qatar Council. Let's get to Qatar. And after the Sri Lanka attacks, there were various reports on various blogs that once again somehow Qatar was involved in either funding or abetting a terrorist activity. The government has been denying this forever, and there's no evidence of it, the government of Qatar. Why does this keep coming up?
Well, I think it's just false propaganda. It's absolutely nonsense that Qatar was involved in that. The real issue is that ISIS is not gone, and ISIS is now adapting after they've lost territory in Syria and Iraq to basically international terrorist events. But Qatar, of course, has absolutely nothing to do with that. It was a tragedy what happened in Sri Lanka, but it's just false news, and it's just a continuing propaganda campaign against Qatar.
Who do you think is at the epicenter or the genesis of the continual negative propaganda campaign?
Well, I think it would be reasonable to expect that perhaps other countries who are blockading Qatar are behind this, or maybe individuals or paid agents, or there may actually be some people who actually believe this, but as you noted, it's absolute nonsense.
Oh, there's absolutely no evidence of it, but it keeps getting out there. A lot of people think, well, I mean, if you look at when the blockade started, the United Arab Emirates, hacked into the Qatar news agency.
The news agency, yes.
Yeah, and put false things there and put false things on social media, so it's all fake news. And the blockade coming into the second, it's almost unbelievable. It's coming into 24 months.
Second year, yeah.
And we don't even talk about it now, right? Like it's not even there because the government, the Qatari people have figured it out. And so it's kind of a blockade, but it isn't a blockade except for the tragedy on the humanitarian.
The real effect, actually, Qatar has come through this blockade, John, stronger and far more economically viable than it was before. They managed to essentially reorient their economy in a matter of weeks, and they were in a sufficiently strong financial position that, for instance, when other governments tried to manipulate their currency, drive down Qatar's currency, they had the capacity to buy up all the currency on the open market. So they came out of this just fine. But who lost out on this, frankly, was the United States, because the Gulf Cooperation Council was always the bedrock of our policy in the Gulf. And now it's fractured. It's fractured from a defense standpoint. It's fractured from an economic standpoint. And that makes our efforts, and particularly our efforts against Iran, just a lot more complicated.
That's exactly it. It's a shame this has all happened. There's no end in sight, though, because there's no real incentive now for Qatar to negotiate anything. Best thing to do is for the Gang of Four, which is Egypt, Bahrain, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, to just walk away from the whole thing. We'll see what happens. I'm out of time, though. I really want to thank our special guest today, Ambassador Ann Patterson, for making time for us today. Ambassador Patterson, most recently the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs in the U.S. government in the State Department. She's also was ambassador to Egypt, ambassador to Pakistan, and now she's the president of the United States Qatar Council. Ambassador Patterson, Kentucky Derby weekend. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, John. Always a pleasure.
John Fredericks Radio Network. We'll be right back. Keep it with us. The truth, my friends, lives here.